I'm wondering if these are like malicious weaponized squirrels. Is there like a squirrel boot camp that they're training these squirrels and setting them loose?
They're squirrel drones.
Hey, that would be cool. Have a flying squirrel jumping off a drone.
Oh.
Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right. Protect your patience. Day and night. Donna and David, the experts on your side. Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right.
All right, today we're going to be talking about squirrels. Yes. And really, it's not the kind you're thinking.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is the kind you're thinking. I don't know. But usually when I say squirrel, it means there's a distraction somewhere.
Yeah.
This time we're talking about literal squirrels.
And, squirrels are fun.
Yeah. So, sometimes your downtime may not be hackers. It may not be malicious insiders. It may not be anything other than a squirrel. And we're going to talk about how that's possible today. But before we dive into that, let's talk about another settlement that happened.
Yeah, it was good news. Well, not good news. You know, we always get people like, oh, they don't ever have any of this enforcement with a business associate. Wrong.
Wow. Yeah. No, they do. They do.
Yeah. You know, and I think we've seen several now, but this is another one. And this case also started this decade. Which,
Yeah, that is for certain.
you know, we've been seeing some that weren't even in this decade. So it is pretty interesting from that perspective. It's, you know, it's Comstar.
Mm-hmm.
They are a billing service, I guess.
Yeah, according to their website, they're in Massachusetts. They do, or Massachusetts, depends on where you're from.
Yeah.
They provide billing and collection related to their services for nonprofits and municipal ambulance services. So I did see some municipalities posted online about, you know, their breach notification in regards to this. So when I was doing my research.
Research is... you were doing the research. Wait a minute.
Yeah. My research not related to this podcast that may be related to this podcast.
That's good. That's good. I like it. So I'll remember that the next time. Have you researched it, David?
Yeah. Well, when it came through Friday.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was looking through and, you know, I like to post stuff on social media about it. And so I go through and I look at it and I mean, it's your normal stuff, you know, I mean, this company was not terribly small. It had 70 covered entities.
Right.
The breach happened back in, it was a ransomware attack, happened back in March of 2022. And the interesting part about it, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but they got in around March the 19th. It was discovered on March 26th. As you would imagine, you can discover ransomware attacks pretty quickly because it's pretty obvious. So it depends on how long they stay in there. In this case, they stayed in there a week. So there you go.
Nice.
Take note. They were in there a week. Then they set off the bomb. Impacted 585,621 individuals. And the IT service vendor, I don't know if it's an MSP or whatever, but probably IT service vendor started getting support tickets coming in like crazy when the attack happened. Not when they breached on the 19th, but when the ransomware went off on the 26th. Started getting all these alerts and that's how they got notified. And I will give you a little hint here. If you back up the calendar and take a look at it, March 19th, 2022 was on a Saturday. So they breached on a Saturday. Guess what March 26th is?
Saturday.
It's another Saturday.
Ah, see, there is more backing us up on, we say, the weekends, man.
Yeah.
The weekends.
So they breached on a Saturday. 1 week later on a Saturday, they set off the bomb. So, criminals obviously will work nights, weekends, and holidays.
They have a completely different schedule than we do.
Yeah.
Well, and they're on the other side of the world a lot of times. So they then definitely, So it's crazy though that it's these attacks at night and on the weekends, most of the time that's when it's going to happen, and people come into work and that's when they notice them. But in this one, it says they launched the ransomware attack on the 26th, and it was recognized when IT started getting the tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So is it they were working on Saturday, or they launched it on the 26th over the weekend and IT got the tickets on Monday morning? So I don't know, because they're screeching in right at the 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I have so many questions, as we did on the last one.
Yeah. I don't know, because there's not even really any indication of how it really happened. Like, how did they breach the systems? It doesn't say. Was it an email compromise or social engineering? We don't know. Doesn't say. I would venture to say that probably their MSP has, they may have 24/7 work, but most of the time what happens is you have a skeleton crew. There's like, if we see something coming in over the weekend and it looks critical, then we'll respond to it. And that's probably what was going on. The downside is that whatever the IT company had in place didn't catch the initial breach.
Well, assuming that the IT company was contracted to do that. We've just gone through that conversation.
That's true. That is very true. And I'm not disparaging them for not catching it. I'm saying the tools they had in place either didn't catch it or they didn't notice it. Mm-hmm. So maybe the tools were screaming and they didn't see it. So there's questions there, because that absolutely can happen. We've seen many a times where the systems are doing what they're supposed to do. They're telling you somebody's in the house and nobody looks at it, because for a number of reasons, I'm not going to speculate, but we don't know. We just know that it wasn't caught until the ransomware went off, and then the problems started.
Yeah. And you're talking 70 CEs at that time. Now, it says at that time. I wonder how many they have today, how much of a hit they took. It's not a small list of customers that you got to call up and deal with. Mm-hmm. And if, who knows whether their application was something they allowed their clients to access. There's so many areas here that this could wander off to. But the other thing that I see is, this could be that downstream. Mm-hmm. There's so many scenarios where this could have more to it than just what it sounds like. But 585,621. Ouch.
Yeah. Not a small number.
No. So they did the investigation, and we try to look at what the headlines are of where they make their announcement, and it was this time settlement marks 13th, lucky 13 ransomware enforcement action, and 9th in the risk analysis initiative. Now, that's interesting that it's the 9th one in the risk analysis initiative.
Yeah.
I am not certain, but I would guess that means, they started the risk. It was 2024. They announced it, right? Yeah, mm-hmm. They announced it in 2024, and then they did start having some come out, but I don't remember when they did. So the ransomware enforcement, those have been smatterings, and I don't know that was substantial anyway, ransomware, generally their enforcement action has been because they didn't do an SRA, which, kind of.
I feel like almost every one of these settlements could be the enforcement action for that.
Yeah, so, technically, I bet if you go back, all of those ransomware enforcement actions had the lack of an SRA. So that's kind of been, they just weren't calling it that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at acting OCR director Anthony Archeville, if you look at his quote, it almost says as much.
Yeah.
I mean, it says, assessing the potential risks and vulnerabilities of electronic protected health information is effective cybersecurity and a HIPAA security rule requirement. Failure to conduct a HIPAA risk analysis can cause healthcare entities to be more susceptible to cyber attacks. So it's basically saying cybersecurity is doing the SRA.
Well, that's where it's supposed to start. You do that wrong, everything else is going to be wrong.
Yeah, it's your foundation. And so often we see people starting at, step 3, like they're implementing a plan, a risk management plan that's not yet been created, but yet they're implementing things.
Yeah. And well, I mean, if you think about where most of these folks, they'll bring in IT and we need you to handle HIPAA. Okay. And IT just starts installing their normal stack of stuff. This is what we do. There's no discussion about, and so that tells you right there, it's not being done properly.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but how many times do you walk in, or me, I can tell you how many times I walk in and I say, Mr. or Mrs. new client, give me your risk analysis so I can review it, and give me your risk management plan so I can make sure I'm implementing these things that you need. And they look at me like, yeah, we'll get to that at some point. So they don't have one. So I can't, I can't follow one. I just have to say, all right, we're going to do recognized security practices, and until you can actually give me a plan to follow.
Yeah. But I mean, that is why we're having our 9th SRA and our 13th ransomware one. So they did agree to a 2-year cap, and they paid $75,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, there was more found. We've learned from our OCR friends that a settlement, you settle based on just maybe one violation. There's a bunch more that if you went to a civil money penalty could have been applied.
Mm-hmm.
But you learn in the cap where all the additional ones are. And, it starts with conduct a comprehensive and thorough SRA of EPHI that you hold, develop a risk management plan. But then the next 2, I always think it's important that we point out. Review and revise as necessary written policies and procedures to comply with. Now remember, this is a BA.
Right.
And the BAs usually say, all I have to do is the security rule. To comply with the HIPAA privacy, security, and breach notification rules.
Mm-hmm.
Done. Over. No further conversation. You have parts of all of those rules apply to business associates. And they even said specifically in there, the breach notification by a business associate policy and procedure.
Yeah.
So that was huge. And then train its workforce members who have access to PHI on its HIPAA policies and procedures.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you train your staff on your policies and procedures, not just what HIPAA says.
Yep.
So yeah.
A lot there. There's some other things I want to pull from this. We don't typically do this, but I think that it's worth noting some of the things that we see when these come out, like from the standpoint of what happened, and reading between the lines a little bit. So I mentioned one of them already about the Saturday thing.
Right.
The other thing that I'll bring up, and we've talked about this before, but just because a business has lots of clients in healthcare, does not mean that they've got a solid privacy and security program. Everybody thinks that everybody else is doing the vetting. When you tell me Well, they got a lot of other clients in healthcare. They must be good. You're telling me I'm not going to vet them because I assume the other people have.
Exactly.
And this is what gets everybody in trouble because nobody's actually doing it.
Nobody's asking.
It's like, I'm going to go to this restaurant because the line is long, therefore the food must be good. And then you get in there and you find out it's not. And you're like, well, wait a minute.
I don't like any of this food.
Yeah, everybody thought it was good because everybody else was standing in line.
And it's so often that's the way that we operate. And I mean, but it's one thing if you were actually asking, right? If you would say, hey, did you vet them? And if the answer is no, but so-and-so uses them.
Yeah, like that's my vetting.
Yeah, then you know that you're 2 down from so-and-so uses them. You might as well properly vet them using a lot more than do you do HIPAA.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with a referral. Like, oh, somebody referred so-and-so to me. They had great success and great experience and everything. That's great. That's perfect as far as customer service goes. But a privacy and security program, you have to ask some questions.
Yes.
I'm not saying go fire them if they don't have one yet, but I am saying you should go to them and go, hey, how about this? You need to be building this or we're going to have to go bye-bye.
Yeah.
Like, we need a plan in place for you to address these things or we can't continue doing business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, I think, a thing that, particularly with small businesses, because, everybody trusts these other folks, but nobody's asked. Like, people refer us and they're like, they did blue, 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 blue. It's like, there's a list of things that we do. And, you can go check us out in so many ways. And if somebody just said, well, I don't have to know anything about what you do, I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong. And what we do is a lot different than what a billing service does. We don't have PHI.
Right.
And, it's a lot different than what you do. And that's why you have to make these decisions based on the type of vendor and what they're doing for you.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
So if you're giving them 587,000 patient records, somebody better be asking some questions.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
So another thing to note here is that ransomware groups, they will hang out in your systems until they're done.
Yeah.
And then they set off the ransomware bomb. So when you see ransomware, when you see the screen pop up, because it's not a secret, you got it. When you see that happen, that's not the beginning of the problem. It started days or weeks ago.
That's the beginning of your knowledge of the problem.
Hey, there you go. Yeah. Until then, your ignorance was indeed bliss. Now it is not.
Unfortunately.
So just know that. And people panic. Ransomware's happening. Oh my God, we got to hurry. We got to do this. Look, it's already happened at this point.
Yeah.
The only thing you need to be in a hurry to do is get your systems back up and running. You're not going to stop the problem as far as the data breach. That's already happened. You're too late for that. So that's another thing out of it. The other thing that I want to bring up here that we are seeing a lot of happening. Now, remember now, this is 2022. We're seeing a massive increase now in 2025, which is class action lawsuits immediately following these incidents. And if you do a quick search on this particular incident, you'll find class action lawsuits and other lawsuits happened very quickly on this. And we're seeing this more and more and more. So not only do you have the ransomware costs, the cleanup costs, the outage and downtime costs, the OCR investigation costs, because it still costs you a lot of time to go through the investigation.
Yeah.
The corrective action plan costs, the fines, insurance, all these things, lawyers. Now add on top of that class action lawsuits.
And those drag on and on and on. And yeah, okay, insurance takes care of it, but you're still being involved.
Even if it did, how much time is it costing you? Because that is also a monetary cost.
Well, and it's going to cost you when you renew your policy.
They won't renew you. You don't have to worry about it. So I tell people all the time, look, my job is now twofold. Used to, my job was to defend and protect the client. Now my job is to not just do that, but also make them defensible. So how can I make you defensible in court? And so that you can prove you were doing some level of due diligence and reasonable and appropriateness and all that, so that you can come out better than you were had you not had these things in place. So,
well, and that's what we tell people all the time is, look, I'm telling you these things, I'm making these recommendations because if you were in some sort of legal issue, I know I could testify 100% that I believe these are solid recommendations based on experience and standards and all of these other things, that you were doing what was reasonable and appropriate. That's it. That's the most important thing.
Or I can testify that you weren't. What do you want?
Or I can say you don't want me to testify. Right?
Yeah. You don't want to subpoena me. It will not go in your favor.
Yeah, that's it. All right. So, and there are plenty of cases they're probably still having to chase. It's only been 3 years. So, I don't know. But if you go to their website now, there is a page on security and data protection.
Interesting.
Yes, and it has all these things that they now do. And it starts with at Comstar ambulance billing service, the privacy and security of client information is treated with the utmost importance.
I'm sure.
Yes, recognizing the critical nature of safeguarding sensitive data, especially in the healthcare sector. Efforts have been made. Well, how much effort? I have questions. Efforts have been made.
We thought about it.
We've made some effort, not a lot, but efforts have been made to align security practices with industry standards, including HIPAA, ISO 27001, NIST 800-171, and NIST 853. These standards guide the implementation of security measures designed to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data entrusted to Comstar.
It sounds like a very well legally written paragraph.
Yeah, it does. But that I was reading, I was like, yeah, okay, this is what I expect. Efforts have been made. Screech. That is a very well written. In the meantime, you popped into chat, as we are known to do with each other, and told me, hey, ChatGPT just gave me this great line. And since it had to do with ransomware, I thought now would be a great thing to finish this discussion on the ransomware with the quote you had gotten.
Yep. So the quote that I got was, when it comes to ransomware attack, survival isn't luck, it's leadership.
And that is 100% true.
Yep.
But it's not leadership at that point. It's also leadership left of boom.
Yeah, right. So if AI can know that, why can't you? So okay. It's a leadership thing. I mean, everything that happens left of boom directly correlates with how easy things will be and less expensive things will be right of boom.
Yeah.
Like it's once the milk is spilt, it's too late to make sure that your floors can take the spilt milk.
Yuck. All right. So you ready to move on to our squirrel conversation?
Yeah, man, because I'm excited.
Years ago we did a episode called Cyber Squirrel and had a little squirrel at a computer,
Uh-huh.
and we are like cyber squirrels, but that was because it was distraction, as you said. But we then became concerned that, oh no, somebody has trademarked that and we're going to get in trouble. And we did find this cybersquirrel1.com, and back, I think they ended in 2019.
Oh,
and
so sad.
they were tracking the number of times that wildlife in general had caused power outages. And I mean, they've got all these things like, birds, and it's a long list, but by far, like a substantial, most of them are 3-digit numbers. And I think the squirrel was like 5-digit number. It was at least a 4-digit number. So it was kind of interesting to see, even, going back to it, looking at it now. But then I'm like, well, how does that compare? And a quick search tells you right away that, yeah, it's still, we haven't found the technology to beat a squirrel. So there was a study that said like 11% of outages had something to do with like squirrels or wildlife. And here was an article that I picked up, and it was like from 2024. Just it hadn't even been a year yet, I don't think. And it's from Monmouth County, New Jersey. I'm assuming Monmouth. I don't know. It's New Jersey. It could be Monmouth. Anyway, squirrel causes widespread power outages. And you hear them, like when you're reading it, the first time anybody encounters it, you can imagine that they're like, a squirrel. But once you've encountered it, yeah, a squirrel. 11,000 customers.
Wow.
Out of power. And the squirrel came in contact with electrical equipment inside a substation. This caused circuit breakers, which are designed to protect sensitive equipment, to cause outages in 6 neighborhoods.
I'm wondering if these are like malicious weaponized squirrels. Is there like a squirrel boot camp that they're training these squirrels and setting them loose?
They're squirrel drones.
Hey, that would be cool. Have a flying squirrel jumping off a drone.
Wow.
Doing a halo drop into an area. I can see Mission Impossible Squirrel Edition.
Yeah. And then it lands on the substation, and you see the cartoon where they're electrocuting, you see their little skeleton. So I'm sure things did not go well for the squirrel when they came in contact with electrical equipment.
Yeah, imagine not. Imagine not.
I saw one article. I'm like, I don't want to link to that one. It discussed how the squirrel's contact caused a fire.
Yeah.
So you know that part of the fire, the fuel of the fire, was the squirrel.
Yeah.
Anyway, squirrel dumplings. Anyway, I know you've had them. I have. So outage caused some areas, schools to close and businesses to delay their openings. And so that's an important point. And then also, the Howell Point Swim Club was without internet even after their power was restored around 11 a.m. So
how do you use the internet in the swimming pool?
Well, it's like you clock in. It's the same thing. It's like you forget just how important it is in everything. It's like, is this a member? All those different things. They were like, yeah, we're going to old school paper, pencil. So even the swim club needed power and the internet to function. So in healthcare, it's all about understanding that not only do they need, clinical staff and all these others, but power matters, and a lot of other utilities matter. So often when we talk about incident response plans, we're talking about, a cyber attack, and it's bad. But when the power's out, your data, and then even a defibrillator might not work, unless it's the one that has the batteries. Charge, Anyway, it's more complicated when you have a utility issue than when you just have a computer issue. Often, though, the utility issue also causes a computer issue. And that's what this guide that was a utility failures in healthcare toolkit. Dun, 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 I wanted to make sure people knew about, because it takes you through a lot of really interesting things to consider in your plan. So it's a power outage thing, but it's a lot of other utilities that it takes you through. And this ASPR TRACIE, and anytime I need to know what ASPR TRACIE stands for, I always have to look it up.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
It's the people who know stuff about when stuff goes wrong.
Yeah, it's quite a long acronym.
Yeah, they're part of HHS, though. The Administrative for Strategic Preparedness and Response is ASPR, and then TRACIE is the Technical Resource Assistance Center and Information Exchange. At least that one they used all the actual letters, just the TRACIE. So maybe sometime I could work that out, but I can't keep up with it. But this is like a collection of tip sheets about all these things where they've kind of like merged all this stuff together. So they have a whole bunch of resources, and they kind of tell you how to use the resources, which is great. And so I want to just kind of hit on some of those things. They're talking about, electrical fuels, like, what if you can't get gas and you run your heat on gas and it's, some ridiculously cold number, or, you have gas operated equipment a lot of times. And, in healthcare, you have to worry about things like oxygen machines and being able to provide oxygen, when you're having surgery or you have patients that have trouble breathing. And then, of course, you have the IT and telecommunications outages, which is often overlooked as part of your utilities. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we have to worry about risk to patients and to staff, and not just, security's not convenient. Neither is an outage.
Squirrels aren't convenient.
Squirrels aren't convenient. So one day, Alfred the squirrel makes a wrong turn on the power line on his way to work, and his little briefcase falls in the substation and goes to get it, and you have a power outage. That's the kind of crazy stuff, though, that happens. So, you got the natural disasters and all of that, but it could be just a perfectly fine, beautiful day and everything's gone. It gets all shut down. And if power goes out, in particular, power outages impact so many more things than people realize until you don't have power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I was going to charge my phone later. Wrong.
Yeah.
And keeping in mind, power impacts maybe your ability for water. Like, I know you'll understand. I grew up out where we had our own well water. Mm-hmm. And the well was way down at the bottom of the hill. And if there was not power to push the water up the hill, then we did not get water. So no water means, even though we should, and like most people would think you would have water, not in that scenario. So there's all kinds of little variables that are specific to your environment that you should consider. And that's what
I see you carrying buckets of water up the hill.
So Pa can have a shower and putting it in the bath. So just know, there's all kinds of iterations, and, it's like the lights blink. It seems like they always just do one quick blink before the power goes out. Have you ever noticed that? It's like blink, gone. And a little blink, and suddenly now all of your operations is shut down, and you have a very expensive tent.
Yeah.
But, oxygen, right? But their medical devices go black. Some of them have batteries because they move them around, but how often are those charged? And the number of times you see people come in and plug in their devices in the treatment rooms. And of course, the EMR's down. And David, the most important thing where you're concerned is the coffee maker isn't working.
Dude, I'm out. No coffee, I'm out.
You do. I don't know how you drink so much coffee, dude.
So you recognize that whenever we were up at...
Yeah, I was like, I know you do, but it's whenever I'm with you where I really see it in action, and I'm like, dude, just hurts.
I know. It's constant. And my kids they're always laughing because I'm the guy that can drink coffee at 10 o'clock at night and go to bed.
No, it's just, at some point, acid has to build up or something. I don't know. Anyway, so that then shows you, if it's a serious problem and you can't even get coffee, how you going to handle that?
Yeah,
because,
that's going to be rough.
David needs his IV. And
start eating coffee beans.
Yeah. So, that'll make you sick. So we got electricity, fuel, oxygen, telecommunications, IT, and water.
Mm-hmm.
Water is also key until, you can't have, people are working, trying to bring it all back up and figure out how to keep things running, and they cannot go to the toilet.
Yeah.
So there's those things along with, healthcare kind of needs to remain clean.
Kind of.
So if you go through, and it does a really good job. It says, here's a need and here's some things to consider. Here's a need and here's some. So it does a really good job of taking you through a hazard, vulnerability, things to think about, understand your infrastructure, things that have failed before, and importantly, things you've added that have never failed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the generator. That the whole, if you're at an ambulatory surgery center, you have to have a generator. And, they're like big truck engines mounted to the side of the building, like parked outside the building. You keep them loaded with fuel. And when those things crank up, it's like boom, 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 boom. It's a very terrifying moment. But when you flip that switch to, even if you have the generator, and I had to go through this test because I kept telling them, you're going to need one more UPS. And they're like, no, we're good. It'll catch it. No, it won't. Fine, I'll just stand right here. I'm not going to touch anything. Go ahead, flip the switch. Oh, man, we're going to need a UPS on this one. Yeah, I know. Because there is that little gap. So if I lose things in that little gap, even if it's a generator, and generators in some cases can't power everything. It can only power a limited number of things. Are you aware of that? How do you keep fuel in them? All of those kind of things are questions that you need to ask. And then I thought this was a really interesting point that they made is coordinate with utility providers. Are you on all of their priority restoration lists?
That's a good one.
Because, you and I would think that we should be able to be on that list, but they don't care.
I can promise you I'm not on that list.
Yeah. We even tried, my mother-in-law was on oxygen and needed it. And we had the, portable one, but when she was plugged in, if the power went out, So I took one of my UPSs over and we called and they're like, yeah, no, we can't do that. We'll note it. And,
yeah.
But it's not like we're going to make that, we can't. Okay.
That's when you pick up the phone and be like, hey, Billy Bob, it's me, David. Think you can push me up to the front of the line?
Yeah, unfortunately for where we live, we're at the end. We're at like the line between the EMC and the power companies where they
Yeah.
switch. So yeah, we're at the end.
Oh boy.
Anyway,
Well, I mean, the good thing about being at the end though is you could probably run an extension cord to your neighbor's house.
that would be pretty long, but yeah, at least I could go down the road and they. So our friends that live just in that next line, we can go to each other's homes. That does help.
Yeah, I was went to a house one time, and houses were probably 50 feet apart, so not terribly close, but not too far. And there was extension cords hanging in the trees, going from one house to the other. And I was like, "What is the deal? Like, why are the extension cords up in the trees?" And they're like, because we don't want to run over them with a lawnmower. Okay, never mind that you're stealing power from your neighbor. You don't want to cut the extension cord.
Yeah, remind a comedian driving a lot and listening to the comedy channels because that always keeps me awake.
Yeah.
And one was talking about stealing the cable from the neighbors, and that they went over and had a meeting about, we think you need to upgrade your package to include some new channels. Anyway.
Yeah, there is that.
So it goes back to having those strong business continuity plans, and we talk about business continuity all the time, and I don't think people realize they treat these, power outages and those kind of things, a water problem, differently. That you can connect the business continuity plan of a cyber attack right into a lot of these power failure situations.
Oh yeah. I mean, nothing will tell you how good your business continuity is until something happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had the floods up here in North Carolina. So right outside my area, but there's some clients of mine that it affected. And, up until then we were like, okay, if we need to, we can have, this equipment brought in, we can get your alternate ISP set up and all this other stuff. But guess what? They didn't have any power, and they didn't have a way to get power. And so it doesn't matter what kind of equipment I can bring in. If you can't have power, you can't have internet. and nothing was working, and they couldn't run off because some people were like, well, why didn't they switch to using their phones or a hotspot or something? The practice they were in, they couldn't even get a signal inside the building.
Oh, and that was already a known.
Yeah, like it was known, but it wasn't even something they thought about. Like, why would we run off of our phones? That's ridiculous. We would use something else. But what would happen is they literally had to have somebody go outside and look up stuff on their phone and then come back in with the information.
Wow. See, I mean, it's just little stuff like that. And you can build a plan around it if you spend the time now. I mean, you could do things like external antennas. And, there's some things you could do to improve or resolve that.
Yeah. And everybody was trying to get on the satellite internet stuff at the same time. So
yeah,
you couldn't buy an antenna anywhere. And then it was like a 2-week turnaround to get you activated. Mm-hmm. So there was nothing. I mean, nothing that anybody could do.
Yeah. So it's those kind of moments that you want to think about before they happen.
Exactly.
Yes. It goes through training and exercises that you should do, scenario drills, make sure that you do multidisciplinary teams because that's really important. You can't, if you don't know people are using something, then you can't make a plan for it.
Yeah. This is one of those things where it's better to sit down and say, show me how you're doing this.
Yeah.
Because if you ask, how do you do this? They're going to tell you something that doesn't necessarily match how they're doing it in practice.
Yep. Show me. The show me state, Missouri. Show me. Anyways, everything is show me. And then educate your staff on the emergency rules and communication backup options, even in social media. Because it's the same as when you're in a cyber attack. And they had a great little, one of their many considerations on this one, I thought. Communicate with staff, patients, and their loved ones, and the public about the facility status and any affected operations. Here's the key. Standardized pre-incident messages based on the facility's hazard vulnerability assessment. What a great idea. I think we've talked about that, haven't we? I think we just talked about that in boot camp when we were doing all our discussions about incident response. Mm-hmm. So, you've got to know what's going to happen, and when everything goes out, you've got to make decisions quickly with all of this. And no, it's not a lot different. Now, granted, you don't have to go stop the power outage, because that ain't happening. Alfred the squirrel's already gone. But you gotta activate all that stuff. You gotta get everybody involved. You got all of those things have to come up and running, and they don't happen instantaneously on their own. Mm-hmm. So that's how you gotta activate your plan. And a lot of people don't even think about how to activate the plan.
Yeah.
If you only have 2 or 3 people, it's a lot easier to activate your plan. Hey, y'all. But if you got any more than 2 or 3, you got stuff that you got to get everybody on the same page, phone tree, whatever. And then they point out and take you through all of the other stuff that we talked about in incident response plan, run after action reviews. Please, please, please do that when anything happens and goes wrong. Anything that causes you to have to stop your normal day and deal with a problem, make note of that, and how can I prevent it or be better prepared for it? Can I do anything different? Update your plans. Don't just file them away. Your 3-ring binders, that's not what they're for. Explore new technology for backup power.
Yeah.
They're coming out with new stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. Even if it's just have you seen I know you've seen where you have the little power that you can take camping, and you open up the solar panels, and that can power enough to keep all of your mobile devices, where you can go out and look up patient information.
Yeah. I mean, you're I'm sure you're like me. Oh, I know you are, because you have these charging blocks. Yeah. And I've got 3 or 4 of them. I keep them charged all the time. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, most of them are solar charging, and I'll leave them sitting in the windowsill.
I went and was staying in a B&B and saw that it was really bright sunlight, and went and grabbed mine and put it in the window.
Yep.
It doesn't hurt.
I keep them charged. No, I keep them charged up all the time, and because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and no, the solar can't keep it fully charged, these big battery packs that we get, but it will maintain it to a certain level if you keep it out in the sun. So I thought that was a really good thing. Just there are so many cool things that people are coming up with, and it's not just your old school generator anymore. You're not out back starting to grab that old lawnmower engine. Let's see if we can crank this thing up here. And then consider utility resilience when doing new construction and renovations. And I often, I have redundant ISP at my house because I was out, gone, and my internet went down. I couldn't get to anything. Now I have a little T-Mobile, and T-Mobile now makes and offers literally call it a backup internet service that you can use, and it's not designed for you to operate on at all. It's not got a lot of gigabits, if you will, any of that, but you can connect it as your failover, and all of a sudden, once I put it in, it was funny because then it was like, why is the internet so slow? And finally realized that AT&T had gone down. It was like just a quick, maybe 15-minute outage. But all of a sudden we were like really, really slow, and I couldn't figure out why, and it was because we had gone to the redundant one. I'm like, well, we tested it.
Yeah.
I hadn't even had a chance to test it, and I tested it. So, but when you're doing those things, if you're putting in new things, you're doing new construction, that's the time to ask these questions again. How can we make things better? So, there you have it.
There you go. Everything from breaches and ransomware to crazy squirrels ruining your day. No telling what you'll get here. All right, folks. Until next time, remember that HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.